Now, of all the mysteries that exist in the Star Wars universe, and there are certainly plenty of them, perhaps one of the most fascinating is just what is Mortis and what is the deal with the three godlike Force users that inhabit it, and those are of course the father, the son, and the daughter. And if you've never seen the story arc in Season 3 of Clone Wars that deals with them, I'd highly recommend checking it out, even if you've never seen any other episodes of the show. And don't worry, not much context is required to understand these 4 episodes, since they're really just a one-off story arc that had little to do with anything else in the show. Anyway, what I'm going to be doing here in this video is assuming you've either seen this particular story arc about Mortis, or if you haven't, you know the basics and will hopefully be able to follow along. I also want to note here at the start that I'll only be considering canon sources for my thoughts and theories, and those sources will primarily be Clone Wars and Rebels, though Dave Filoni himself has recently said some interesting stuff that I'll be touching on and taking into account as well. Okay, so with that little disclaimer out of the way, I think the best place to start is with what Qui-Gon Jinn had to say about Mortis, and as you'll recall, Qui-Gon appears twice in this story arc, once to speak to Obi-Wan, and then once to speak with Anakin, and what he has to say to Obi-Wan is particularly interesting because he describes Mortis as a conduit through which the force of the universe flows, and that it acts as both an amplifier and a magnet, and there are 3 beings that are all seeking Skywalker. And why this is very interesting, especially the part about it being a conduit, is because we know that there are 2 aspects of the Force, the living and the cosmic Force, and that, as the name suggests, all things that are alive generate and are a part of the living Force, which is basically what Yoda says in The Empire Strikes Back. And when someone dies, they lose their consciousness and join with the cosmic Force, and when new life is born, it draws that energy from the cosmic Force. So in essence, these 2 parts of the Force constantly replenish each other. And Qui-Gon's words here seem to suggest that Mortis may be a place in between these 2 aspects of the Force that allows the cycle to occur. And as evidence of this, we saw that Qui-Gon Jinn was able to fully manifest upon Mortis when he appeared to Obi-Wan and Anakin in turn. And keep in mind that Force ghosts are basically someone who is able to retain their consciousness after death when joining with the cosmic Force. And all of this is important because in Season 6 of the Clone Wars, when Qui-Gon first speaks to Yoda on Dagobah, we learn Qui-Gon's training to become a Force ghost was incomplete, and he is not able to fully manifest. Yet on Mortis he is able to physically manifest, which seems to be evidence to the fact that, again, this is perhaps a place between the living Force and the cosmic Force, or just a part of the cosmic Force itself. In fact, this was pretty much confirmed by Dave Filoni in the special features on the Season 4 Blu-ray of Rebels, when he said that the world between worlds, Mortis, and the gods of Mortis were all connected. He also shot down the idea that the world between worlds, first seen in Rebels of course, was supposed to be a place that allowed time travel, quite the opposite really. He said it wasn't a place of doors and gateways, but rather a place where time does not really exist, not in the way we understand it as some type of completely linear construct anyway, which is very much apparently the case with Mortis as well, because even though Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan seem to be there for days, when they eventually get out only seconds have actually passed by. So instead of Mortis and especially the world between worlds being about time travel, they're instead places where everything, past, present, and future, are all happening at once. This seems to get highlighted by the fact that Anakin at one point is shown a very clear and well-defined vision of his future as Darth Vader, whereas usually visions of the future, as Yoda suggests with his famous line about it always being in motion, are hard to figure out or decipher. Also, there's the fact that Ezra hears many different voices from both the past and future while in the world between worlds, further showing time has no real meaning there, and the reason why he only saw certain events beyond the portals he peered through was because he was in some way connected to those events, like the death of Kanan for example. But he could not go through and change those events, not without risking destroying everything, because had he reached in and pulled Kanan out and saved his life at that moment, that means the explosion wouldn't have been held back by Kanan, and then Ezra would have died in the past, which leads to the paradoxical question of how Ezra, who would have died then, could be the one who now goes back and saves Kanan in the first place. This is also why Ahsoka had to go back through the same portal she entered, back to the same time and place that she had come from, because changing anything beyond the portals in the world between worlds could lead to destruction. Anyway, before I get too far off track here, I think it's interesting to note here that George Lucas was the one who came up with the idea for Mortis, which was confirmed by Filoni in those Blu-ray extras. In other words, this is not all something that Filoni or someone else came up with and that George allowed them to run with. This came from the creator himself. It's also known that originally Darth Revan and Darth Bane were both going to be introduced into the canon in this story arc, that they were going to be the ones influencing the son and convincing him to try and leave. But Lucas changed his mind because he didn't want Sith Force ghosts, which makes sense, especially when we learn later on in Season 6 of the Clone Wars from the Force Priestess that becoming a Force ghost is considered the great gift. And yes, right now I know some of you out there may find it really interesting that this idea for Mortis actually came from George Lucas, since I often talk about how balance in the Force is described by Lucas as the absence of the dark side, not a balance between the dark and the light. However, balance in Star Wars is about finding a harmonious or symbiotic blend of the two, and with this being the case, as I often try to point out, the problem is not the existence of the dark side, rather it's the existence of those who wield the dark side and use it for their own selfish gain. That is what causes imbalance, and why at the end of Return of the Jedi, when the Sith were gone and the Jedi had just been reborn, there was balance, because a Jedi who uses the light only to achieve or maintain balance obviously doesn't cause imbalance. Okay, getting back to Mortis once again, one of the things I find rather telling about it is that there is always a quick and stark change from day to night on the world. Never is there a twilight or a transition phase where there is balance between the dark and the light aspects. Instead, it instantly goes from a bright, peaceful world full of life to a dark, chaotic world full of death, which in my opinion is meant to symbolize the failings of the father to maintain the balance between his children, which is then the reason why he has called Anakin to Mortis in the first place, to take his place and to reaffirm control over the son and the daughter, and to balance things once more, which, when Anakin brings them both to heel at one point, seems like he is destined to do. And what's interesting about the call or transmission that Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan responded to is that it is a Jedi distress code that hasn't been used in 2,000 years, and this could be very telling about exactly who or what the father is, or once was, because I really think there are only 3 possibilities as to what he could be. The first is that he is a will, or basically one of the gods of the Star Wars universe, and their existence is an idea that goes as far back as the earliest drafts of the original Star Wars movie. In fact, Star Wars is supposed to be a story taken from the Journal of the Wills, so for all we know, the father might even be the last of their kind, the last of the Wills who was tasked with overseeing their final creation and making sure things remained balanced. It's even possible he created his children maybe as a way to help manage the dark and the light sides better, and in so doing, may have somehow inadvertently brought into existence Force-sensitive beings who could be influenced or use the powers of these 2 aspects of the Force, the light and the dark, of course. This is then when he locked them away on Mortis, and he has slowly but surely been losing power and dying ever since, because keeping them under control is a constant struggle. Next, there's the possibility that the father is somehow a creation of the Force itself, something that came into being to help maintain the balanced state the Force inherently seeks to be in, or in response to the dark and the light sides manifesting themselves in the form of these 2 beings, the son and the daughter. This explanation could, again, then explain where and how Force-sensitive beings came into existence in the first place, because perhaps when the father came into being, or was chosen, others became Force-sensitive as well, and that has been occurring ever since. The last, and what I think is the most likely possibility for who or what the father is, especially considering the little pieces of evidence we actually have, is that he used to be a Jedi. For all we know, he might even come from a long line of former Jedi who have all answered the call and made the ultimate sacrifice to become the father, to become the very fulcrum upon which the dark and the light sides are balanced, which is something any true selfless Jedi would no doubt take upon themselves if they could. This could also begin to describe the true nature and purpose of the prophecy of the Chosen One, that it foretells of a child being born of the Force who will bring balance and quite literally keep it. And as Yoda suggests in Revenge of the Sith, the prophecy may have been misread or misunderstood. And along these lines, perhaps Anakin does have a father, and it's actually, well, the father from Mortis, who somehow manipulated the midichlorians to create life or to create himself a replacement because he is mortal and he is dying. And this has been done by other fathers in the past who were reaching their end as well. And creating life is something we know is possible if Palpatine's story about Darth Plagueis the Wise is to be believed, and if Plagueis could do it, certainly this extremely powerful Force user known as the Father could do it. Furthermore, with time working differently upon Mortis, the current father may have been a Jedi 2,000 years ago who, from his point of view, answered the call and took up the role of father and has lived a normal lifespan. But in all reality, 2,000 years have passed in normal space, while only a fraction of that time has passed for him on Mortis. And now he's using an ancient Jedi code, one that's not ancient to him of course, to hopefully call forth the one to take his place, to call to him the new chosen one that he may have had a hand in creating. And yes, I realize this is basically the opposite of how time worked for Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan, because they were on Mortis for what seemed like days, but only a few seconds passed by in normal space. But again, time has no real or true meaning there, so perhaps it flowed or worked differently for the father, especially since he and the Force would likely want his reign over his children to last as long as possible. Anyway, if this or something like it is the case, it still leaves a few important questions, like who was the first father and where did the children of Mortis initially come from? And to answer the question about the children, I go back to my theory about them somehow being creations of the dark and light side themselves. In other words, I think the son and daughter are physical manifestations of the dark side and the light, or something akin to avatars of the Ashla and the Bogan, which the Bendu and Rebels confirmed do exist. They are living, breathing representations of these two sides of the Force, which have been locked away in this strange realm in an effort to protect the balance, a fragile balance that either one of them would wreak havoc upon if allowed to go free, because it would shift it too far to one side or the other, which is what we constantly see happening upon Mortis. And why it has to be Mortis, this conduit of the Force, is because it is the only place that the Force, or someone wielding it, can be strong enough to contain them. As for where the first father fits into the picture, and does a mother exist, and again, I'm only dealing with canon sources here because fans of the EU know all too well a story involving the mother. Anyway, I think the mother and father roles are interchangeable. In other words, the one who balances the two can either be male or female, and will hence take on the title of mother or father, depending on what gender the current chosen one is. Why do they use these familial titles in the first place? Likely this was done or was a decision by Lucas to help depict the close and important relationships between the dark and the light sides, how they are more like warring siblings that are part of the same family and need to find a way to coexist, rather than truly opposing aspects that should destroy each other. The first father or mother likely then would have been a very wise and powerful Jedi, maybe even the first or prime Jedi for all we know, and dealing with these two avatars of the dark and the light may be the reason for Force-sensitive beings coming into existence in the first place, as almost like an allergic response from the Force to create something to deal with that which was otherwise destroying it. A fun possibility here is that the Force Priestess seen in Season 6 of the Clone Wars could even be the prime or first Jedi, along with the first mother that kept the son and daughter in check, and eventually received the great gift and became the first Force Ghost. All of this could even be the reason the first Jedi came into existence at all, as a way to honor what she had done and to continue to try and forever keep the Force in balance, and to be ready to take her place someday if needed, to become the chosen one or to train the next chosen one. It's even possible the mosaic scene in The Last Jedi could be a depiction of the sacrifice made by the Prime Jedi to become the mother and to balance the Force. Now, do I honestly think I'm on the right track here? Well, maybe, but then again, I could be way off, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on my theory, or hear your own theories in the comments below. And the thing is, we'll likely never get any definitive answers. In fact, Dave Filoni kind of suggests that very thing when he says part of the beauty of Star Wars is the mystery, and never knowing what might even be real or just being seen in the eyes of the beholder. And I do very much agree that one of the most fascinating aspects of Star Wars are the mysteries, and those surrounding the nature of the Force are the most fascinating in particular. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to share your thoughts and theories on Mortis, or to tell me what you think about mine. So leave a comment below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.